Today's presentation, Growing Summer Vegetables, will be about an hour with time for questions, but we ask that everyone stay muted and your video off due to the number of people on the call. If you have a question, please use the chat box at the bottom of your screen and we will get to as many questions as we can. Some during and some after. So just please be patient. Our speaker today is Lee Rosenboom, who has been a master gardener since 2012. His area of expertise is vegetable gardening, and he is a strong proponent of raised bed gardening. He volunteers regularly at the Ojai Master Gardener site and truly enjoys talking about gardening. He has given talks on summer vegetable gardening, winter vegetable gardening, and raised bed gardening. He will talk to us today about how to grow a summer vegetable garden, learn what types of veggies grow best in the summer months. You will receive information on soil prep, irrigation, and pest control. We have many upcoming Zoom classes and in-person classes. Please check out our website and our Facebook page for more information and registration. Please see these addresses in the chat box, as well as our email address for our Master Gardener Helpline, which will answer your gardening questions free of charge. Again, everyone, please stay muted with your video off and use the chat box for any questions. And thank you very much for completing the poll. Lee, I'm handing it over to you.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. I'm Lee Rosenboom, and we're going to talk about summer vegetables today. And first of all, if I can get the screen changed. Okay, what are summer vegetables? Well, vegetables that strive with long days and can withstand some heat are summer vegetables. There are some vegetables that can grow in the spring and the fall, but not necessarily in the hot summer days. Typically, you start growing summer vegetables in the spring, like right now, and usually by September, October, the days are shorter and summer vegetables start waning. And at that point, you start thinking about your fall garden. Typical summer vegetables, just about everything in the nightshade family, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, and potatoes. Vine crops, summer squash, winter squash. Winter squash is not grown in the winter; it is eaten in the winter. Summer squash is eaten in the summer. Cucumbers, watermelon, cantaloupe, beans, and sweet corn. Some leafy vegetables and herbs you can grow in the spring and fall, but they won't handle. If you're in an area where you have really 90, 100 plus temperatures, they're not going to do too well. Most of these vegetables require warm soil in order to germinate. So unless you start them in a protected culture, they're not gonna germinate real good unless the soil is warmed up. I want to talk a little bit about planting the garden. Now, this is a review for many of you, but you want to choose the best available site for your garden. Full sun is best, minimum of 5 to 8 hours. Level sunny area with well-drained soil. Have an adequate supply of water available. I'll be talking about water off and on. If you're new to gardening, start with a small plot or a container-sized garden. Just about any vegetable that can grow in a garden can also grow as a container plot, a container plant. Now, the trick there is you need to match the pot size to the size of the vegetable. So tomatoes, an indeterminate tomato is gonna take up a lot of room, so you need to have a really big pot, like a half a barrel. Before you plant, you need to prepare your soil carefully and plant vegetables that your family or your neighbors like in quantities that you will use. Sometimes you can put zucchini on doorsteps and run away fast. But plant disease-resistant varieties that are adapted for your area. I'll talk about where you can find all of that information, and water should be provided or available to each planting area. Preparing the seed bed, soil should be spaded or rototilled when it's moist but not wet. If you can grab some soil with your hand and it stays clumped together, it's too wet. If it gradually falls apart, that's great. But it needs to be moist, but not too wet. And you can prepare the seed bed in autumn before the rains, or if you're planting a winter garden, definitely do that in the autumn, and then if you have a summer garden, prepare it again in the spring. Work the soil about 6 to 10 inches deep, but try to avoid bringing up some of that subsoil to the surface, as that does not have the humus and all the other good soil that plants need to survive. Okay, if the soil is too wet, wait a few days and then try again to break up the large clods. We haven't had a lot of rain in the last 2.5 months. So unless you've really watered it heavily, you shouldn't have this problem right now. You may have to rake and dry the soil several times to achieve the desired soil condition. It should be finely broken up. There should not be any clods bigger than probably the end of your little finger. If the soil has hard, dry clods, you need to wet them and then start working them down. Rake the turned seed bed in several directions while it's soft, full of moisture, so that any clods or layer of soil are broken up. Large dirt clods, they cause poor germination because the seeds planted in or under them have little contact with the soil, but they also have little contact with light. So it's important. That's one of the things that seeds need to germinate is light. Water. Your watering schedule, of course, will vary according to your soil and weather conditions. As a general rule, water should be applied when the top 1 to 2 inches of the soil have dried out. Now, that's a general rule. If you have newly planted seeds in that first 1 inch of soil, if you let it dry out, they're not going to germinate. So you need to keep it moist until they have germinated, then you can follow that rule. For optimal plant growth, the soil should remain evenly moist as plants mature. Try to avoid alternating wet and really dry conditions. Plants like more of an even moisture. Use a layer of mulch around the plants to help conserve soil moisture and reduce the frequency of irrigation. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about mulch. Mulch is something that is put on top of the ground and is not mixed into the soil. Mulch can be almost anything. It can be black plastic, it can be rocks, it can be wood chips, but I don't recommend most of those. Actually, any of them. What I recommend is a good garden compost. Put it on top of the soil, and as it further decomposes, it will add some nutrients to the soil. And then when you harvest the plants and pull out that production, you can actually work that in, and it'll add more humus to the soil. Mulch discourages the growth of weeds, but you need to make sure that water is able to move through the mulch layer into the root zone of the plants. Fertilizer should be applied before any new cycle. Now, this is really important. If you have 2 cycles a year, you need to fertilize at least twice. And you can also side dress with fertilizer during the growing season if you notice your plants are getting a little bit yellowish. You can side dress. Now, the 3 main macronutrients are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and it's N, P, and K. And if you look at a bag of fertilizer in a garden store, and it has 3 numbers on it. The first one is nitrogen, the second one is phosphorus, the third one is potassium. And those numbers represent, if you had 100 pounds, if you had a 15, 15, 15 fertilizer, out of 100 pounds, it would be 15 pounds of nitrogen, 15 pounds of phosphorus, and 15 pounds of potassium. It's important, well, and nitrogen is really, really important in the California soils, but because it's kind of naturally low in our soils. Phosphorus is low in some highly weathered soils, and potassium, it's generally not needed. But if you plant a balanced fertilizer like an 8-8-8, 12-12-12, the plant's going to take what it requires. If you add too much potassium, okay, you could have some negative effects, but generally speaking, the plants, as long as it's not toxic, it will just take what it needs. Iron is important if you have an acid-loving plant that's grown in an alkaline soil. Now, our soils in Southern California are generally alkaline, and a good example of an acid-loving plant is a blueberry, and blueberries love acid soil, and so I've only been successful growing blueberries in a pot where I can monitor and add acid to it. I usually use soil sulfur to the pot and work that in, and that tends to make them much happier. Zinc deficiency is associated with loss of topsoil. Okay, management. Crop rotation, that's really important, especially when you get into the nightshade crops like tomatoes, peppers, eggplant. It's really important because if you plant a tomato or in the same area year after year after year, you will build up unfavorable nematodes in the soil. And the only way you can really get out of it is to plant another family of crops. And ideally, you'd have a 3-year rotation, but home gardeners have a tough time with a 3-year rotation. So at least every other year, try to keep from putting the same family in that spot. And of course, maintain normal levels of soil fertility. That means fertilize before you plant, and watch for symptoms of a deficiency of, generally it's nitrogen. Irrigation should be well drained in both the summer and the winter, and of course you'll need to adjust between the seasons and between rain events. What to plant? A really good way to plan your garden is seed catalogs. They still mail them out, but also almost every seed company has a website, and you can go in there and look at the descriptions, look at the adaptability, look at the disease resistant. All of those things are and some of them have really neat charts, and we'll look at some of those in a minute. So, and then of course you need to match your planting zone with the variety descriptions. Here's a chart. It actually is in Johnny's Seeds that has a really neat. It has the variety. These are tomato varieties, if you didn't know. It has the variety, the number of days to maturity. Those days are from transplant, not from planting the seed. It has the approximate seed size. You can see that Big Beef is a good sized tomato. It tells whether it's firm or soft, and then it has some disease resistant codes. And I have another chart I'll show you in a little bit, but then it has key features. So it's really neat to look at some of those things, and it helps you decide what you need to plant. Okay, another good source of information is the seed packet itself. Now, this is a seed packet of Celebrity Tomato. It's one of my favorite tomatoes because it's kind of it's a determinant, and it's kind of a really nice. I love the flavor of it. But on there, it tells you that it's a hybrid. It tells you it's an all-American selection, and it has really good disease resistant, and it is a determinant plant. Now, if you look at the back of that packet, it tells you a little bit about it. Dependable, high yields, large 8-ounce fruits with few seeds, mature at once, fantastic disease resistant, and then it has the codes there. And it resists cracking, harvest 70 days from transplant, and then it has some notes down below. So it's a really good. Now, not all seed packets have this type of information, but some do. Let's talk a little bit about the types of vegetables. And many of the plants that I plant are hybrids. A hybrid is a cross between two different parents of the same species. Seed saving is not feasible. You can save it, but you're not necessarily guaranteed what it's going to be. It may be something that you really don't want. And it generally has disease resistant because they have bred that into the parents. Now, an heirloom is an open pollinated variety, and seed saving is possible because it's an open pollinated. The seeds from the fruit are basically the same as the mother plant. However, because it's an heirloom, it's been around for maybe 50, 75 years. There's not a lot of disease resistant bred into that variety. But some people really like heirlooms for their taste, but generally they do require a little extra care. Now, GMO, okay, I'm not going to talk a lot about GMO, but the point I wanted to make here is that GMO varieties are not available to the home gardener. There are a few vegetables that the commercial guys have, but they're really not many. But there isn't. You just won't be able to find a GMO. They'll label GMO free, but there isn't any. In tomatoes, you have determinants and indeterminate. Now, determinant, remember the Celebrity that I showed you the packet on, it was a determinant, and it will grow to a certain determined size, stage, and height, and bear most of the fruit during a relatively short period of time. Indeterminates are kind of the opposite. They will grow and produce fruit until they're killed by frost, or you get tired of looking at them and you pull them out and start your winter garden. They can reach heights up to 12 feet, although 6 feet is more normal. And you almost always need some really good support for indeterminates. And actually, I like to use support for determinants as well. But you really need a good sturdy one for the indeterminates because they just keep growing. Disease resistant in tomatoes. Look at the codes on the seed packet or the catalog description. Here's a list of a bunch of the codes. I'm not going to go into them, but I just want you to know that they're there. Some seed catalogs will give you a list of the codes and what they mean. And if there's a particular disease that is a problem, you need to select varieties that are resistant to that disease. Okay, I want to go into a planting calendar. And to me, summer vegetables really start in February, and that's when I start tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants in a greenhouse. I have a greenhouse, but you can start them indoors on top of a warm refrigerator, and then put them, as soon as they germinate, you can put them in a window, but you need to keep them moist while they're germinating. But they have to be started in a protected environment because the soil outside is just way too cold. And if you wanted to do transplants, you can probably find them in the garden store, but it's really too early for the warm season crops. Wouldn't recommend planting them in February. March, now we start talking about more action. Still, you can still plant tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants in protected environment. And you can plant some things in late March just directly into the soil. Vine crops and corn and beans are okay, but that's kind of the fringe of the summer vegetables, and the weather sometimes is cold, and they like warm soil temperatures. So if you have a forecast for the next week of cool, damp weather, I wouldn't plant the seeds yet, because they may rot in the soil before they germinate. From transplants, you can, at late March, you can transplant your tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant. And if you had some vine crops that you started early March, you could plant them as well. April, still plant some vine crops from seed, corn and beans from seed directly into the garden.
That was quick. You guys are doing good.
And you can also plant transplants, all the nightshade plants. I wouldn't recommend potatoes at this stage because it's going to get too hot for them. They do better in a little cooler weather. And you can also transplant your vine crops. May is kind of almost the same. You can still plant your vine crops. Good time to plant corn and beans. And you can transplant tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant, and transplant vine crops. In June, you can still plant vine crops and corn and beans from seed, and this is the last time you could be able to transplant the vine crops. Beyond June, you're getting, by the time they mature, day length is going to be way too short. So I wouldn't recommend planting any of the summer vegetables beyond June. I guess there's probably one exception I can think of would be maybe sweet corn. I've planted it. They will, if you germinate them and plant them in August, you'll have sweet corn maturing in November under a lot cooler weather, and it's actually pretty good. Okay, soil information. Decide whether you want to use amended native soil or a growing media like amended potting soil. And you can, if you're in a raised bed type environment, you can completely amend the native soil. In other words, not use any native soil. Very sandy or clay soils benefit the most from added organic matter. Added material amendment. Amendment means you're incorporating it into the soil. You're working it in. If native soil is used, double dig, amend with organic matter, 2 to 3 inches per 6 to 8 inches of native soil. Basically, that's 30% of the top foot of your soil. Generally speaking, vegetables have a fairly wide range of pH that they will tolerate. So you generally don't have to do anything for adjustment of soil pH. And then add a couple inches of mulch to hold moisture and control weeds. Add organic soil amendment each spring and fall to replenish what's been consumed. Okay, basic irrigation management. It doesn't really matter what you use as long as the right amount of water gets to the plant. Irrigation, of course, you know you're going to have to water more frequently in the summer than in the winter, and you have to adjust the frequency between the seasons. Right now, we haven't had any rain lately, but the days are cooler. Although we've got a couple of warm days coming, generally speaking, the days are cooler than they will be in August. That soil should be well drained. Drip irrigation, master gardeners, we recommend drip irrigation, and that is a low pressure, low volume drip irrigation, and it distributes water with very little waste. Drip irrigation is gallons per hour rather than gallons per minute. So if you had a lawn sprinkler, it would not work real well for vegetables. It uses a lot of water. There is an array of products for drip irrigation, and it's much greater. I mean, there are tons and tons and tons of parts for drip irrigation. Drip irrigation advantages: it saves water and fertilizer, allows the water to drip slowly to the roots of your plants, and it delivers straight onto the soil surface or delivers directly onto the root zone. And you can use a network of valves, pipes, and tubing and emitters to do this. Here is a list of some components for drip irrigation. And the only reason I show that is that there are a lot of parts. And what I encourage you to do is, if you are going with drip irrigation, you buy your components from a single source. A lot of times it may say the same thing, but it's not the same thing, and they're not compatible. So I suggest you buy your micro irrigation from a single source. Okay, here's an example of a raised bed. It's onions, but I have a 1/2 inch poly hose that goes the length of, this is a 16-foot bed, so it goes the full length of the bed. And then I've got little 1/4 inch tubing going off to, there's probably 8 of those in that bed, and they will distribute water to the onions. And it'll be kind of a fan jet, but it's still a gallons per hour emitter. I think most of those are, what I use is a 0 to 10, so you can adjust the amount by just rotating the top or the emitter. Okay, pest control. Of course, you know there'll be insects in the summer. Yes.
Before you move on, there has been a couple of questions about soil in raised beds, like what type of soil should be used. Should it be out of your garden or out of a bag? And one person put super soil in their raised bed and wants to know if that was okay.
I'm not sure what super soil is, but generally speaking, if you know, raised beds, you do have to fill them up, and the higher your raised bed, the more soil you're going to need. But I've used all sorts. I've gotten soil in bulk. There's a couple of areas that Green Thumb has bulk soil. Agromin has bulk soil, but you either have to have it delivered, or you need to have a pickup trailer to haul it. You can use the bag stuff, but it tends to be a little pricey. But I usually use I started off with the bulk soil, and then I keep adding. There's a soil conditioner that I buy at a hardware store that I like really well, that I incorporated into the soil. And it's a really great planting medium, but you can almost put anything in there. You could put a little bit of native soil and some bag soil. Native soil is probably more available and a lot cheaper than having soil brought in. But whatever you put in that raised bed, you're going to have to fertilize anyway. So and you can add humus to it as time goes on, so you can build up that soil over time. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Pest control. In the summer and pretty much all year round, there will be insects, there will be fungus, and there will be bacteria that will create some havoc with your garden. All of those things, there are organic methods to control all of those. Organic methods don't always work as well as some of the harder chemicals, but I would use them first, and then if you don't have the desired effect, you should use the least toxic of some of the non-organic stuff. But I would start off with an organic method first. Birds. Birds are a particular problem for me in the wintertime, but they can be a problem anytime. If they get out of hand, I usually use bird netting. I put a support and put netting, and you'll see some pictures from my garden a little bit later, and you'll see how I've done that. Ground squirrels, they're tough. They don't know the rules very well, but I do have some pictures of some things that would keep out ground squirrels as well. Gophers are a problem, but if you have raised beds, you can screen them out through using a hardwood cloth in the bottom of your raised bed. This is a raised bed that I built several years ago, and I was having trouble. It was actually, I started it for winter crops, but I was not able to grow. Hello?
Everybody needs to please
I was not
mute.
able to grow. Okay. I was not able to grow peas. My wife loves shelling peas, and I was not able to grow broccoli. The birds were getting to them, the ground squirrels were getting to them, so I built this to keep them out, and it worked pretty well. That's probably an extreme method. Here's a bed that has I have hoops set up, and the hoops are a 1/2-inch PVC, 10 foot long, and then I've slipped them into a holder on the side that is a 1-inch piece of PVC. And from that, you can either add bird netting, or you can add shade cloth if you want to shade some plants from some really extreme summer heat. Here's another. It was a kind of a portable one, basically the same things to screen out ground squirrels and birds, and it works okay. It works okay. Sanitation. When planting, it's really important to be clean. And if you're planting seeds in a 6-pack or a 12-pack or whatever, you really need to make sure that your conditions are clean, and recommend using a bleach solution on seed planting materials such as the pots, the tools, and flats, and just add a small amount of bleach in a gallon of water, 9-to-1, and soak all of your materials in that water, and it'll be good to go. It really helps keep the bacteria and other things out. And you'll need to discard it after you use it, because the sanitizing of properties will only last a few hours. Okay, planting depth. General rule is to plant 2 to 3 times the diameter of the seed for smaller seeds, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, and larger seeds plant up to 1 inch. Corn, beans, and peas are larger seed, and you can plant them as deep as 1 inch, 1.5 inches, and they'll come up. I want to talk about planting a tomato, because planting tomatoes are a little unique. The general rule for planting transplants is to put them in the soil at the same depth as the original container. Well, tomatoes are you've got a little more leeway in a tomato, and you really need to plant tomatoes deep. And I'll give you some examples here in a little bit. And if you have a tomato that you bought from a garden store, and there's 2 tomatoes in that cell, you can divide them by soaking them in water and removing all the soil, and then gently divide the tomatoes, and then you can plant them in a new pot or in direct seed in the soil. Here's an example. This is a tomato that I grew, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove 1, 2 of the cotyledons and 2 branches from that. And see here, I've removed them, and this is how I planted it in a gallon pot. And you can see that lower branch is just above the soil level. Now, if you look carefully at a tomato plant and you look at the stalk, you'll see all these little hairs on the stalk, and those hairs will actually become roots if you plant them in the ground. So they're kind of like little root hairs, but they'll become real roots if you plant them in the soil. If you can't get, you don't have a situation you can't get them deep enough, you can also turn them on their side and kind of prop the top of the tomato up a little bit. But you need to put as much of that stalk in the soil as you possibly can. Okay, management through the growing season. Okay, you need to check your garden regularly and every day if possible. I walk my garden every single morning, and there's always something different. But you need to look for pest damage and irrigation issues, whether you have too much, too little, the mist spot. And if you need to harvest something, if you need to, you'll notice something different every single day if you go and check. And it's really important to check your garden. Harvest. Again, check your garden regularly, look for ripe fruit. And if you have some ripe fruit, it's best to pick it in the morning when the fruit is a little firmer. And of course, share or preserve whenever possible. Nicole mentioned that I like to do raised beds. I got started in raised bed gardening when I was a trainee. And I became absolutely fascinated with it, and I've never gone back. So what I want to do is talk about raised beds for a little bit. Raised beds can be any shape, square, rectangle, circle, irregular. They can be composed of practically anything, wood, concrete, straw, brick, rock, soil. You notice the strawberries growing in Oxnard, they're all in a raised bed. It's a raised soil bed. It's covered with black plastic, but it's still a raised bed. And the main reason that strawberries are in a raised bed is because they like well-drained soil. And if you planted them not in a raised bed, they would probably not last too long. Why use a raised bed? Well, key benefits: the raised beds can be more efficient in water usage. Mostly because if you use micro emitters, you can see where everything goes, and I think you can grow more vegetables in a smaller space. You can overuse that, and you can crowd things, but so you have to be somewhat careful. But I think you can generally produce more vegetables in a smaller space. The big advantage of a raised bed is less soil compaction, yielding a healthier root system. And raised beds warm up faster in the spring. They can be attractive. Less work if you make them higher. Screen out pests. Gophers is a good example. Just put hardware cloth on the underside, and that will screen out gophers. Improve soil drainage because your A raised bed is a great way to drain the soil. Less bending for plant culture and harvest, and you have more control over the soil. And this you can use, it's easy to use imported soil. You can still use native soil, but you can import soil from whatever source. There's lower maintenance for weeding, irrigation, pest control, and replanting. And I think that's because you can create a plant canopy. Once the plant canopy is established, you really don't have a lot of weed problem. And I think you have an improved soil condition and moisture availability with the raised bed. I think it's a good way to balance nature's resources, and you can create some really cool and beautiful designs. This is an example of a kind of a shallow raised bed, but it's built to accommodate a wheelchair-bound person. I wouldn't plant any deep-rooted vegetables in that, but there are a lot of vegetables that could be grown in a bed that's shallow. Raised beds are generally no wider than 4 feet. That means if you have access on all sides, you need to be able to reach into the center of that raised bed and not have to walk in it. If you have to walk in the raised bed, you've really designed it wrong, and you lose the major advantage of a raised bed by the compaction. Doesn't matter how long they are. 1/2-inch hardware cloth to protect from gophers. 1.5 to 2 feet high to protect from rabbits. 1.5 feet is good. I had some that were 16.5 feet last year, and the gopher or the rabbits were jumping into it. So they've learned they jumped a lot higher than I thought they would. And of course, you can make them higher to minimize bending when gardening, but the higher they go, the more you have to fill them. So the general height is 1 foot, but you can definitely go higher than that. Here's an example of a round straw bed. It's made with a rebar mesh and straw. Rebar mesh is that stuff they use in sidewalks. It's like almost, it's not quite this dimension, but it's roughly 4 by 8, and you can cut that in half lengthwise, fasten the ends, make a circle, and then line the inside with sections of a straw bale. Use straw, not hay, because hay has a lot of wheat seeds in it, and then add soil to it, and it'll last for a while. You may have to renovate it once in a while, but things grow really well in there. Here's an example of a raised bed I've not used, but I'm going to use it. It's a really neat idea. It's you can buy these cinder blocks from Lowe's or Home Depot. They're about 6 inches tall. So the first 2 beds are 5.5 be 11 inches tall, and the last one is 3 sections high, so it would be 16.5 inches tall. Just cut you can cut your wood to any length. If you wanted a long, narrow one, you could make it 2 foot by 4 foot, 2 foot by 6 foot. Wouldn't go much more than 6 foot without adding some sort of inside support to keep it from going apart. There's actually a hole in the middle of those cinder blocks, and you could put like a piece of rebar in there to kind of hold it in place. I think it's a really neat idea, and the cost is not too bad. Each one of those cinder blocks is about $3. So for a 4x4, 11 inches tall, you would need 8 of those. So you'd have $25 built, less than $25 built in the concrete, and then whatever it took for the wood. And the neat thing about it is, if you wanted to move it around, you could. It's very dismantleable. Okay, what can you grow in a raised bed? I've got some pictures that I'd like to show. Here's more of the straw raised beds. I've got garlic growing. picture on the left is April, and then on the right is either late May or very early June. You can see the umbels are the seed heads are forming on the top. They're called umbels, and they're not far from harvest. Tomatoes, you can grow them in tomato bed and raised bed. Sweet corn did very well. Here's a picture of a raised bed last year on the left before I filled it, and then just recently with it's got onions growing in it. But it's a really cool. It's also a 4x16 raised bed. Here's tomatoes that I planted just this last week, and I think this first bed has got 8 tomatoes in, and the next bed has got 6 tomatoes in. They're the indeterminates I plant 2.5 feet apart, and the determinants I plant 2 feet apart. Here's an example of peas. This is the left is in January, and on the right it's last Sunday, actually 2 days ago. And you can see the peas have kind of grown up and they're starting to produce. So
Lee,
that was a really neat idea. I've never grown peas like that. Yes.
could you please, if the film is not, I mean, the PowerPoint is not advancing. Now it
Oh,
is.
it's not?
It's good. No, it was
Oh, it is?
a few minutes.
Okay, it was advancing for me.
Oh, okay.
Um,
What we see on
so
our
let me
screen
know if it
now
does
is
it again.
tomatoes newly
know.
planted.
Okay, so what you're seeing here is peas that I planted. I planted them in early December, and this is about 6 weeks after they emerged. And then on the right is last Sunday. Good example. I've got dill growing in the middle, and then pickling cucumbers growing on the outside with some. So it actually worked pretty neat. Picture on the left is an old horse water tank. It didn't hold water anymore, and I drilled a whole bunch of holes in it. But you need to make sure that you've got really good drainage, because I killed some things by water not draining very well. So I drilled holes, but I needed to make them bigger. And the picture on the right is just a long, narrow raised bed. I think it's like 2 feet long, 2 feet wide, and probably 20 feet long. I've done a lot of things in that. Okay, that is the end of my presentation, and I'd be happy to entertain questions.
We have one question here. I've been using fabric pots and noticed the bottoms are turning a green moss color. Is this bad?
Well, say that again.
This person has been using fabric pots and noticed that the bottoms are turning a green color. Is this bad?
Not really. I grow I start my seeds on a mat in a tray, and after a while I'll get green algae growing in that mat, and doesn't seem to bother anything.
Okay. I just want to tell everybody, we've got a couple of questions. Everybody wants to know if they can have access to this talk, and yes, it will show up on our Master Gardener YouTube channel in a couple of days. It just has to be edited, so you can look for it there. And our so it's our YouTube channel. Another question, and it just showed up, the address just showed up in the chat box for our YouTube channel.
Okay.
Okay, if I use a bathtub as a container, will the drain be enough drainage?
I hope so. It's a pretty good sized drain, so it should. That's interesting. I've not thought about doing that, but that's really a neat idea. I'd maybe put some rocks around it to keep the soil from building up in the drain hole. that maybe it might keep it draining a little more regular.
Okay, another question. I'm growing potatoes for the first time. How often do you water potatoes? I'm afraid of overwatering.
Yeah, potatoes, they like a lot of water, but they also like to be well drained. So then there's lots of ways I'd like to know what kind of how are they planted? I mean, there's lots of ways to plant potatoes. But they do I think the key point is they need to be well drained, but they also like a lot of water. So I would water them regularly and keep the soil moist, not wet, but moist.
Okay. He's saying that the potatoes are planted in the fabric pot,
Okay, that's perfect. That's good.
Yeah. So it'll drain.
And so you've got good drainage.
Okay,
Okay.
another question. I have dragon fruit in a 15-gallon pot. How much water does it need? Is it weekly or more often?
I'm afraid I'd probably have to pass on that question. That'd be a good helpline question.
Yes.
I don't know a lot about growing dragon fruit. So I wouldn't be much help there.
Okay. All right. Somebody is answering it, says weekly, that it's a tropical cactus. So.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, any other questions? How do you use straw in the garden? How thick is it? How thick do you put it around the plants?
What was that again? How do you use what?
How thick do you, I think they're saying, how thick do you put the straw around the plants in your garden?
Oh, it's a good question. When you open up a straw bale, there are natural sections. When they bale it, they actually jam a bunch of straw, and it's actually a natural section. Older straw is better because it'll stick together a little bit. If you get a brand new bale of straw, it might not hold together very well, and you have to be really careful. But older straw, if it's been let out in the weather for a season, it'd probably be a lot easier to work with.
Okay, so
but there are natural sections, and probably if it's new stuff, it might be 4 or 5 inches thick, and if you have the older stuff, it might be 3 or 4.
Okay. Okay, let's see. How can you tell if you have straw or hay? Somebody gave me a bale after Halloween.
Usually Halloween is straw. They use straw hay is really expensive, and straw is it's still expensive, but it's not as bad. So
Okay.
I cannot imagine anybody using hay for Halloween. It's probably straw.
Okay.
And it'll also be lighter colored.
Okay. And you also mentioned that using straw is better than hay because hay has seeds in it that will grow in your garden, right?
Yes, there's a lot of weed seeds that are in hay.
Okay.
If you have straight alfalfa, probably not so much, but I still would recommend it. It's really expensive. Hay could cost, I don't know what the current price of hay is, but the last time I bought it, it was over $20 a bale. And it's probably, with the water shortage and the drought we're in, it's probably more than that now. And straw, the last time I bought a bale of straw was like $8.
Okay.
So much cheaper. And if you can go to a garden, especially if we've had, probably in January, it'd been a good time to go to the horse places and see if they have any damaged straw that got wet. That's a great place to get it more reasonable. I've done that. It works.
Okay. And you talk about, somebody had a question about avocado trees. Could you answer that?
Possibly, but I'm not a tree person, but I'll see what I can do.
Okay. They've had an avocado tree for 3 years and there's still no fruit, how long until they see fruit?
Usually about that, in 2 or 3 years, they should start blooming and produce some fruit. How many avocado trees do they have? Sometimes they need another. Avocados have a A and a B blossom. They're a type A and a type B. I think Hass is a type A, but Bacon is a type B. And one of them will have male flowers or female flowers in the morning. The other one will have female flowers in the afternoon. And that's how they cross-pollinate. But 2 or 3 years, you should start seeing blossoms. I have an avocado tree that I planted last spring and it is growing, but it is not going to bloom this year. I'm thinking next year it should bloom.
Okay. Let's see. I'm looking for the questions here.
If you don't mind.
Let's see. How do you store heirloom seeds?
Well, you need to make sure that you remove them from the fruit, and you'd have to dry them really quite. You can dry them and then put them on a paper towel to dry them some more. Make sure they're very, very dry, and then you can put them into like a paper envelope and put them in your refrigerator. Or that's probably the best. But you would avoid extreme temperatures for sure. I wouldn't freeze them. They might be okay frozen, but they would be okay in a refrigerator, but not in a plastic bag, but in a paper bag, paper like an envelope or something.
Okay, and how long can you store them for?
They'll last for quite a while.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking years.
Oh,
Tomato
okay.
seeds are one of the few seeds. I mean, with good storage, they'll last for 20 years. With
Okay.
good storage, and that's a caveat. It has to be good storage.
Yeah. Here's a question about a lemon tree. What organic fertilizers work best for the lemon tree?
Well, there's probably lots of things. There's a fertilizer that I use. I get from Fruit Grower Supply. It's an organic fertilizer made out of primarily chicken manure. Fruit Grower Supply is in Santa Paula. That's the only organic fertilizer that I know of that you could apply like that. But there are lots of things that you could do otherwise. You can make a tea out of a lot of things and apply it. The main thing that they need, that the citrus will need, is nitrogen. So you need to have whatever source you have needs to be rich in nitrogen.
Yep. Okay. I think we are good on the questions. Thank you very much, Lee. Thank you, everyone. Please, if you have any more questions, you can go to our helpline and send pictures to them and ask your questions. And there we go. Oh, somebody's asking, is P&K fertilizer good? And yes, it is. I'm just going to answer that one.
Yes, it is. The plants really, let me kind of expand on that a little bit. Plants really don't know the difference between organic and commercial fertilizer.
That's right.
The advantage of an organic fertilizer is that you have a shot of kind of building your soil, increasing the humus of it, and increasing all the good things that soil has. That's where the organic stuff comes in better. But the plants really can't tell the difference. You know, nitrogen is nitrogen, phosphorus is phosphorus. But as a good friend said, plants can't read.
Yeah, they don't know P and K, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening. Thank you
All
very
right,
much,
thanks for
Lee.
attending.
Take care. We will see you again.